So that's the first item. The second item is, as she mentioned, this idea of trying to create on the upper level as the house is stepping up the hill, access from the kind of dining and kitchen area to an outdoor area where they can do barbecue and that kind of thing, and adjacent to the pool. And right now, as you probably, if you were on site, you know this is pretty steep in the spot. So the idea of making it a little bit more gracious connection to the inside is the desire to create 2 retaining walls here that create that level patio area. So that's really the extent of it, and you know, keeping it well within the setback. And the height of it would be, I think we're at 8 feet right here. So
Correct.
yeah,
Say again the height?
8 feet.
On the back wall, how much on the side wall?
Sidewall's around 6'6".
Yeah, a little lower on the
Yeah,
side
it varies as it slopes down.
because as it slopes down the hill.
Any questions? Rick, Eric?
There wasn't any geotechnical information along with the R documents, but given that it's a very steep slope and continues upwards also, and the nature of the soils in that area, some of it being laterite, I don't know what the soil condition is, and laterite's tendency to lift. Have you fully covered that engineering aspect?
We have. We've had a full soils report done. They've done test borings in appropriate locations to it, and it's guiding the design of our foundation, both for the house and for all the site walls and the pool.
Are you already past dimension drawings? You're now doing working drawings, or?
Well, we're I would say we're in sort of early design development in the scheme. So we're you know, to the point where we need to get the foundation understood so we can understand costs for a client. So yeah, we've done that study.
Okay. Joe did an excellent job of explaining it to Phil and I yesterday. I'm still baffled about what Joe assured me of, that the cut and fill is pretty much balanced there.
Yeah, so one of the things that is worth noting is that there's an area between the L that we're actually doing a fair bit of fill to create a more level area that will be able to be used for recreation for the family.
And you're gonna whack the upper right-hand corner to fill that.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Yeah. That'll work.
Whack is the right word.
Yeah, I was quite impressed by the steep angles on the lot, and I was impressed by the Frank Lloyd Wright-ishness, Joe actually affirmed that, of the existing structure and the philosophy that you build houses to tuck in to landscapes, for which this is antithetical to that kind of philosophy. But we're not here for design. It's just way of blabbing on, but you know, okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
No, I'm fine.
No deal. I visited the site on Tuesday as well and had the same comments about the steepness of the lot and the soil condition at that upper right corner, the big one.
Yeah.
That's a big job.
Yep, understood and noted,
It's gonna be solid steel with a little concrete on it?
basically.
It's a challenge.
Yeah.
I think that is ambitious.
Hey, Richard, are you done?
Yeah.
Okay, so the question I was having as I went to the site was about drainage, with all this changing around and everything, and we've had experiences where, you know, it was like, hey, no big deal, but it was a big deal. And that steep an area, and with even the runoff out down the street, it could be pretty significant if it's not thought really well through. So, and then also with that much impervious area being added, it's a significant change to the absorption rate in that area too. So what have you looked at, or how have you dealt with that?
Right, so we've actually been speaking with our civil engineer about that specifically, and we've come up with a couple different strategies about drainage on the site, especially around retaining walls for landscape as well as the building retaining walls. And we actually just did our calculation for the impervious surface to size our retention tank on the site. We've come up with strategies for breaking up the retention tanks into possible different zones to collect from different areas on the site, given kind of the steepness, as you point out, of specifically this area versus, you know, an area down here. So we're working through that process now to develop, you know, a necessary and proper drainage system to make sure we maintain as much water on site.
All right, and when you retain the water on the site, where does it go afterwards, or what does it do?
So right now, we haven't gotten to full depth on that yet, but most of the idea is that it's gonna be, as long as the soils are appropriate, percolated to the site.
Okay. All right, and the tanks will be lower than the land? Okay. So we've had situations before where the tank was down and they wanted to pump it back up, and so in those situations, I wanted to see dual pumps or some backup system so that it doesn't overflow and those types of things. So this is not gonna be an easy thing. So how are you gonna get equipment up there to do all this? I mean, that's a narrow road and there's a lot of weeding around and, you know.
Well, it's something that the contractor will have to address as
That's
far
his
as
deal.
getting staging up there, and it's a tricky site, no doubt.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
The answer is very slow.
Again, the building department is supposed to assure themselves they have an adequate
Yeah.
condition, construction operating.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. I mean, I did not drive my sport car that day. I drove a minivan. I pulled it on the side right by the driveway, and it left like half a car length wide on the right lane for people to go around. So there's not a lot of space up there to park anything, and it's a steep hill up the driveway.
That's
So
right.
It's a lot of logistics that has to be worked out to make this comfortable for the neighborhood during the construction, and then comfortable afterwards when all the drainage issues come up.
Yeah,
So,
and I know we'll be complying with all the town's ordinances related to that stuff, but something that the contractor will address once we get a contractor on board.
okay.
Any further questions for the applicant?
Yeah, just as we're talking about this, so are you saying it's gonna be a one-for-one excavation to fill on that site?
I don't know if we have the full count
Yeah, we don't have the
figured
full
out yet, but
Yeah.
it's close. We don't have it fully cooked yet because of all the detail are still going through.
So the material that will be hauled out will be at a minimum then, is that what you're
That's right.
saying?
Yeah.
Any further questions?
And
Thank you.
Me too.
Anyone else want to comment on the new structures permit 76 Ridgeview? Comment, please.
Yeah,
Come forward, please.
we got, I got notice about the.
Please come forward.
and
Right
it's
here,
not
please.
flagged, so-
Thank you.
I'm Regina Casper, I live across the street from, we live on 75 Atherton.
Yeah.
And what surprised me, listening now to the proposal, was that in the announcement which we received, there was really no mentioning of the structure will be demolished, correct? Yeah.
Please bring your comments here.
So the structure will be demolished, and I think, you know, that ought to have been in the announcement, because we just got an announcement about a new retaining wall
Yeah.
being constructed. No more. So I happen to be here just by chance. I have not come to a town meeting before, but I was just, you know, because there was another 1996 Ridgeview Drive event happening tonight. So what I would suggest is that we actually be informed of the full changes being actually planned. I don't have a comment to this, except that the construction, we have lots of
Please
construction
bring
in the
your
corner.
Hello, please
We
bring your.
have,
You have
We
to
have-
record it, that's it.
yes, thank you, I appreciate it. We have, of course, had a lot of construction, and there's actually construction going on the property
Yes.
beyond
Right,
this
that's
property.
96.
And so by now, there will be actually probably competition. And this property beyond the property, of course, has a chance to park in the cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
But for your, any of the large trucks to be parked will be very difficult on Ridgeview Drive, because Ridgeview Drive is fairly steep, and people come around the corner fairly fast, and so I think that ought to be taken into account. Otherwise, I'm fine with what is being proposed, of course. I take it you are not removing any trees?
You ought to apply for the planning commission.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Anything else?
okay, thank you.
Liz?
I can just mention while you're here, 96 Ridgeview is not going to be heard tonight. That's going to be
I saw
continued to
that, I
another.
saw
Okay,
that.
good. Thank you.
Thank you.
But there's a question about the demo. They could demo a given residence and the neighbors don't have to be notified of that.
Correct. We don't have any notification requirements for demolition of residences, for construction of a new residence, as long as it meets the code requirements. So what we've provided in the notice is the specifics of what's being requested before the planning commission. And I believe we also have contact information in all our notices. If anyone wants to email or call us, we'd be happy to show them plans or give more information.
Along that line, though, I think it's interesting that we did this, just got through doing that on the Circus Club. Might add a fifth condition, very similar to the COP that you put into the Circus Club, submit a construction operations plan to be approved by the building department, including no parking on the street.
Well, the
That's tough to do in that area.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, beyond what's already allowed. I mean, you're already allowed to use a public street.
Yeah,
So
but it's
it would
gonna-
have to be within,
would not be on the property line, no.
You can only, the construction parking is limited to the frontage of the property.
Right, but all the way up and down the street, that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, that's the current code
but they wouldn't be
restriction.
allowed to do that anyway.
But let's get that on there. Thank you. Okay, any further comments, anyone? Is there a motion then?
Yeah, I'll do it. I move that the planning commission approve the special structures permit at 76 Richmond Drive based on the findings and for the reason enumerated in the staff report, subject to the conditions listed in the draft special structures permit to allow a basement outside of the footprint of the first floor. I further move that the planning commission approve the special structures permit at 76 Ridgeview Drive based on the findings and for the reason enumerated in the staff report, subject to the conditions listed in the draft special structures permit to allow the construction of a sunken patio with retaining walls greater than 6 feet in height at the rear of the yard, period.
And the amended use permit.
And the amended use permit, sorry.
We made the motion, is there a second, please?
I'll second.
All seconds, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion is
I'm
approved.
gonna vote no.
You got-
I'm not comfortable with this plan for this site, so I'm gonna vote no.
The motion passes 3-1. The applicant is approved. If you want to appeal, you have 10 days. The next one is heritage tree removal permit at 228 Atherton Avenue. Heritage tree removal permit to allow removal of a heritage swamp cypress tree. Staff report.
Thank you. The next item before you is a request for a heritage tree removal permit at 228 Atherton Avenue. The applicant is requesting removal of a swamp cypress tree. A new residence and associated accessory buildings have been permitted for this site, and demolition of the previous residence has already occurred. This item was brought forward, I believe a year ago, for a basement greater than the footprint of the first floor, so the site might look familiar to you. The tree itself is the cypress tree listed as number 11 on the site plan. It is located outside of the main building area, towards the left side of the property near the rear of the lot. Two trees, which are marked as number 3 and 13 on your site plan, have already been approved for removal at staff level and have been removed. The applicant's arborist indicates that the cypress has structural faults, which make it prone to failure and present a hazard to the property. Specifically, there are 2 locations on the tree with codominant limbs. Failure of one of these limbs could cause damage to either the subject property or the neighbor's property. Further, the tree is a non-native species, which the applicant indicates is out of character with the town. Kevin Keelty, the town arborist, is not supportive of removal of this tree. He notes that the vigor of the cypress is good with normal shoot growth for the species and that the form of the tree is fair to poor. Mr. Keelty notes that the tree has been well maintained in the past and indicates that potential hazards can be reduced with the use of normal trimming practices as well as the installation of cables to support the tree. The tree has been protected throughout the demolition process, and the applicants will be able to build the main residence and approved accessory buildings without significantly impacting the tree. The tree is unique to the town, and the town arborist concludes there are methods available to preserve the tree. Therefore, staff finds that the removal of the tree would not meet the intent of the general plan and does not recommend approval of the permit. The applicant has proposed a significant replanting plan, which includes over 180 trees, 119 of which are size 48-inch box or greater. If the Planning Commission approves the heritage tree removal permit, it would have to make the required finding in the staff report in the affirmative. If approved, staff recommends replacement with 2 24-inch box trees or 1 36-inch box tree. To date, we have received no public comment on this item. The applicant and the applicant's arborist, as well as the town arborist and myself, are available. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Andrea? Kevin, comment?
I've been watching, since before the demo, we've been watching that tree, and it's an unusual tree to Atherton. As a matter of fact, it's the only one of that size that I know of in Atherton, of all the years I've been working here. And so even the prior contractor, even when he was on site, everybody's been asking about removing that tree. So I've resisted up till now with the tree. The four crotch formations for the tree, I believe, with cabling would improve the hazard rating of the tree, and the tree could be saved.
So I have a question on that.
Sure, go ahead.
The cabling aspect of it, to me, seems a little bit interesting as a solution. I mean, it's one thing if we say prune better, and it's another thing if we say it actually doesn't look as bad as you say. But if the cabling puts it in a point for me that sounds like the tree does have some structural issues that we're trying to prevent failure on. Is that correct?
Yes, the tree does have some structural issues, and commonly when a tree has those poor crotch formations, heavier than normal pruning is recommended, and then oftentimes we'll put cables just to help strengthen the tree, so that the 3 leaders are all work as one. And cabling is not a real scientific art, but it has been quite productive on trees.
Kevin, I got a question. I've heard over time that cabling, because of the way the bolts are installed and so forth, ultimately leads to failure of the tree.
In some circumstances, you'll have a failed cable system. Generally, they last 20 years, approximately. One thing great is this site has a very good arborist working for them who is more than qualified for cable installation. But, cabling does not guarantee anything, of course. There's never a guarantee with a tree. So you could still have a torn leader even with a cable.
And a swamp cypress is not exactly indigenous to Atherton.
No, they're native to Louisiana. The swamp area.
It's a long
Bald
way,
cypress.
a long way from home.
Yeah, it is an unusual tree. It's a deciduous cypress, so it loses its leaves in the winter, much like the dawn redwood here, it loses its leaves in the winter. So it's just was an unusual tree until the report was improved. There was no way I was going to let him touch it. Once we got the report from Michael Young about the poor crotch formations, and the one has actually had some splitting, then I was a little bit on the fence. But since from the start of the project I was against it, I'm kind of holding with that.
Does their arborist have, is their arborist here tonight?
Yes,
Okay,
so they're
I'll wait
here,
for,
yes.
I'll wait for questions.
Any further questions from staff? Okay, is the applicant here and his representative want to make a comment, please?
That is one big hole, by the way.
You're good in the house.
So
Like the Empire State
Floors
Building.
below grade carpet.
Yeah. 3 floors below. I was gonna say, it looks deep enough for that.
No, it's, they have to over excavate
Yeah.
to build everything. There's lots that goes underneath the foundation, so. You guys may remember the house from before we were here?
I wasn't on the board then, but I was.
I wasn't on the board.
Okay, some of you may. So, the tree in question is this tree area right here. This, in general, I think we very much comply with the intent of the town code, and we're, like you mentioned, 180 trees that we're planning on, 119 of them are 48-inch or larger. We have a flag lot situation here, so it's not seen by a bunch of neighbors or a thoroughfare. It is only seen by a couple neighbors, and when we're done screening the property, it would maybe be visible by a couple neighbors from their second floor. In regard to the neighbors, we did contact all of them, and several of them have, 3 of them have signed off in support of removal of the tree. The town arborist did recommend in his report that if you guys did pass it, that it should be replaced by 2 24-inch or 1 36-inch box tree. We actually had currently picked out an olive tree to replace it. The base of that is 82 inches, so that would be about a 108-inch box or something like that once they box it up. There's several options that we have like that we would like to replace it with. For the fact that it's a swamp tree and it's not native, we did point out that it's not necessarily something that's aesthetically appealing. It doesn't really feel like it belongs on the property. And once these structural failures were brought to light, the town arborist mentioned that the tree's been well maintained, but it's in fair to poor condition, and confirmed that there are those structural failures, and the only way that it can be a safe tree is to get rid of it. There's been 6 failures on it today. We looked at it with the arborist, where there's already been 6 major limbs that have come off of this tree. And, there's gonna be kids playing here. This house is being built for, not to live in for just, 20 years like the Cables might be, but for, a lot longer than that. So that's kind of our reasoning, is it's a safety issue, it's a life safety issue. So.
Did I hear you say the only safe tree is a dead tree?
No, honestly, we love trees. We love trees. There's no way you can say that we don't like trees. We want to have lots of them. And, we feel that it makes a house a home. So, yeah.
Any questions? Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Michael Young, the arborist for the owners and the owner of Urban Tree Management. It's an unusual tree. It's the first one I've seen in this area, and unfortunately not particularly aesthetically pleasing. And I'm a big fan of native trees. I love California coast live oaks. We spend, I'd say, 85% of our time trimming oak trees in Atherton, Woodside, Portola Valley, and that's sort of my first love. So this tree, and I appreciate unusual trees. This one I'm not a big fan of. It is out of character for the site, especially for the new plan and the landscape. It seems like a fish out of water relative to the aesthetic that they're trying to achieve here. The structural faults on this tree, it's on the second report that I wrote, the addendum, I don't know if you were able to look at that. It's dated 2/12/14, and I looked at this tree a little bit closer, and there was one of the main scaffold limbs peeled away from the tree, and it's still there. And I don't know if that happened in the last year or so. It's a little bit difficult to tell. But it's lifted off the tree, but it's still attached, and that scaffold limb is attached to a main trunk, so it's ready to give once once they tear, it's gonna continue to tear. You can't cable that limb, it's a half-torn limb, you don't wanna put a cable on a limb like that. The other option would be to cut that limb off, but it's a rather large limb and it's attached to a main trunk, so then you're making a very large cut against the main trunk, which then brings the decay further into the main trunk. So it's sort of this can of worms. And the thing that we did notice tonight that I hadn't quite caught previously was there's a history of failures with this tree. And you can see the telltale tears of old limbs that have torn out and they've calloused over, so they're not quite as obvious as a limb that's freshly torn. But I counted at least 5 18-inch, 12-inch diameter limbs that have previously torn off this tree. And a tree with a history of failures tends to continue to fail. So with all of those points, the lack of aesthetic, the non-native species, the history of failures, and 2 or 3 large codominant stems in the tree, we think removal of the tree is the best way to deal with the hazard. And it's not quite that a dead tree is the safest tree, but a removed tree is the safest tree. But certain trees are worth the struggle and the dealing with the hazard level, and I think certain trees aren't. So we recommend removal of this one.
What do you think of the comments are of the town outbursts relative to the cabling and things like that?
So cabling, we install cables. I think cables are better than nothing for sure. And they are useful in reducing the hazard level. And in this particular tree, they would be helpful in the main scaffold codominant limbs, but there's several other ones that are hazardous, and those speak to the previously failed limbs. So the 5 previous failures that we saw today, you couldn't cable all of those together.
Right. Okay.
So cables help reduce the hazard level, they don't eliminate it. And like I say, not every limb in this tree can be cabled.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
Well, I just want to make sure I understand the 2 arborists correctly.
Yeah.
And it's not so much that you have conflicting reports, you both see the tree in the same light. Kevin, you just think that the cabling is a solution. Am I hearing this right?
It is a possible solution, but there is never a guarantee of cabling. Yeah.
But it's not that you disagree with Michael's report or on the tree or anything like that?
No, he did a great report on it.
So you guys both understand the condition of the tree
Right.
similarly, and you're just proposing saving it with cabling, and you're proposing cutting it down. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that there was no conflict or there were differences in the reports.
I'd like to say that, the thing I would point out is that seeing the previous limb failures and that they weren't limbs that could have been cabled or would have been cabled makes me think that, yes, the cabling might not solve but mitigate a few of the problems. It can't mitigate all of the problems, and that this history of failures that this tree has experienced will continue with cables or not.
Any further comments, questions? Thank you, Mr. Young.
No problem.
Anyone else want to speak on this issue? Yes? Your name, please?
My name's Tony Bates. I'm the owner of the property. I wanted to just speak really not about the aesthetics whatsoever. I think that's been touched on already, but really this notion of life